You can't even do chores, so we can get a divorce, and you better give me your possessions," James said with a smirk as he entered the hospital room. I was hooked up to a lot of machines, but that didn't stop him. Standing next to him was a girl I didn't know. James didn't know I had $10 million. He should have realized that divorce in this situation is a matter of life and death for a housewife like me. "Great, here are the divorce papers," I said. I couldn't stay with a man who verbally abuses his wife. I pulled out the divorce papers I always carried with me and held them out to James, smirking. He accepted them. "I can say goodbye to you now?" "I'll be happy with her, so don't worry, right, Patricia?" said James, putting his arm around the girl's waist. Her name was Patricia Heaton. James grinned and she said, "Take care of yourself, Mrs." "Oh, you're not Mrs. anymore. Take care of yourself, ma'am." They both laughed as they left the room. But their happiness was short-lived. Left alone in the room, I laughed out loud. It's Friday, so the divorce will be finalized on Monday. I can't wait for 3 days to pass. My name is Nicole Wallace. I'm a 47-year-old housewife. My family keeps a simple farm. I don't have any special skills, but I pride myself on my extensive culinary repertoire. My husband James is my age. We were classmates in college. We both came to Florida from rural areas. Since it was just the two of us, I cooked different meals for James, using vegetables and rice with my family's flavor. People often said I captured his heart through his stomach, and I knew it was true. James had always been incapable of doing any housework. I had taken care of him since we started dating, and when we got married, I continued to do all the household chores. Unfortunately, we didn't have children, but we enjoyed our life together as a couple. We both loved to eat good food, and on James's off days, we would often go on trips to enjoy a delicious meal. When we first got married, James was kind, but after about 5 years, he became controlling of me. He never hit me, but his comments became harsh. He would often say, "Whose money do you think we live on?" These words hurt, but I didn't have the strength to resist, believing that he wouldn't listen to me anyway. As a full-time housewife, I felt inferior and could not resist him. After graduation, James took a job with a well-known company, but quit after about 6 years. He was quick to find a new job, but quit after a short time. Because of this, our income was unstable. We looked for money-saving tips, but often struggled financially. However, at the company he had worked at for the past 3 years, he seemed to get along with his coworkers. I had a faint hope that he would stay there for a long time. One day, James came home earlier than usual. "I'm home, I quit my job," he said. "What, again?" I asked in surprise. James's eyebrows twitched. I stopped cooking and rushed over to him. "I'm sorry, I'm just in shock. No welcome back, and you're criticizing what I'm doing. You've gotten very brave," James said. His words made me freeze. James was in a really bad mood, and if I said the wrong thing, things could get worse. "I'm sorry," I said. "As long as you understand," he replied, calming down a little. He sat on the sofa and turned on the TV. I quietly placed a beer and a glass on the table. "Do you want dinner or a bath?" I asked. "Food and alcohol," he replied. To avoid upsetting James, I played the role of a submissive wife. I once had a strong sense of self, but after 16 years of marriage to James, since the age of 30, I really showed my true self. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, James fell asleep snoring on the sofa. The table was a mess, like a child had eaten there. I cleaned up the fallen beer bottles and food scraps on the floor. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Recalling my dreams of a happy married life from my girlhood days, my true feelings slipped out. I glanced at James suddenly, but he showed no signs of waking. Relief washed over me, but I also felt dread about continuing this life. Maybe I should consider divorce. I started planning my schedule for the next day, determined to face the issues I had been avoiding. The next day, James started visiting the employment office and quickly secured another job. While he was job hunting, I went to the city office and signed divorce papers. I wasn't ready to submit them, but having them felt like a kind of protection. I hid the signed divorce papers at the bottom of my bag. If James found them, who knows what he might say or do. "Hey, where did you go while I was job hunting?" he asked. I went to the stationery store to buy some resumes. "Look, I thought you might need them," I said, trying to sound normal. James, who got home before I did, initially interrogated me suspiciously, but quickly cheered up. I handed him the resumes I had bought earlier. After receiving them, James said he was going out for drinks with a friend and left. James's new job was at a reputable company with a solid salary and better benefits than any job he'd had before. When he got promoted after working there for about 2 years, he celebrated with a drink. I secretly hoped that maybe this time he would work there until retirement. James's department seemed to be in sales, and he started to leave home more frequently for evening events. I enjoyed my brief moments of freedom and gathered energy to greet James with a smile when he returned. One day, I received a call from my mother after a long time. Hearing her excited story took me by surprise. $10 million? I asked, stunned. Yes, $10 million. You know the mountains and lands we owned? We don't need them anymore. We had them appraised, and they are worth $15 million. We only need $3 million to enjoy the rest of our lives. So I think you might want to rethink your life too, she said. My mother was never fond of James. She was worried about me, especially after James became more controlling, preventing me from even visiting my childhood home. I was stunned by the amount she mentioned. Furthermore, I was shocked to learn that when my mother inherited the property from my grandmother, she changed the title to my name, so there were no inheritance taxes. It's better not to tell James, but the final decision is yours, she said, hanging up the phone. I felt conflicted between the urge to immediately inform James and the desire to live freely with that money. About a week later, I was involved in a traffic accident. Thankfully, my life wasn't in danger, but I'd need to stay in the hospital for about a week. After storing my valuables in the hospital room drawer, I immediately contacted James. "I'm sorry I got injured," I said. "Huh? What about my meals?" James's reaction made me almost laugh, prioritizing his meals over my injury. "I'll need to be hospitalized for a week. I'm really sorry, but could you buy your meals elsewhere until then? Not even preparing meals for your husband?" What a lazy wife. "Oh, wait, I'm coming over now," James said and ended the call abruptly. I was planning to tell him about the inheritance that night, but now I thought it might be best not to mention it. Looking at all the tubes attached to me, I had a feeling my intuition was right. "You're useless. Can't even do housework. Let's get a divorce, and you better pay me compensation too," James said with a smirk as soon as he entered the room. I was connected to several machines, and a girl I didn't recognize stood beside him. James didn't know that my total assets amounted to $10 million. He should realize that a divorce under these circumstances would be a life and death matter for me, a housewife. "Fine, here are the divorce papers," I said. I couldn't stay with a man who would hurl abuse at his wife in this condition. I handed him the divorce papers I had kept as a sort of charm. James took them with a smug smile on his face. "With this, I can finally say goodbye to you. I'm going to be happy with her, right, Patricia?" James said, wrapping his arm around the girl's waist. The girl named Patricia leaned against James and scoffed at me. "Take care, madam." "Oh, you're not a madam anymore, so take care, old lady," she said. With those words, they both left the room laughing, but their joy wouldn't last. Left alone in the room, I burst out laughing. Today is Friday, so the divorce papers will only be processed on Monday. Oh, I cannot wait for 3 days from now. Just as I had expected, the weekend went by without any contact from James, and it was quite peaceful. I was restless, not used to doing nothing. Since getting married, I was always busy. Every time I got restless, the nurses told me to stay calm. Then on Monday evening, I received a bunch of calls from James. I ignored them at first, but after 15 minutes of constant ringing, I decided to answer. "Could you not be so persistent?" I said. "Hey, what's the meaning of this?" James shouted as soon as I picked up. I couldn't help but laugh. James seemed infuriated by my laughter and started screaming incoherently. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Don't play dumb. The divorce papers aren't being accepted, are they?" James was huffing and puffing on the other side of the phone. I continued to chuckle and responded to his complaint. Oh, I had previously filed a non-acceptance notification. Remember how you used to say, "Let's get divorced" every time we had a fight? I thought it wouldn't be good if you filed for divorce on a whim during one of our arguments. Oh, but I don't need that now. Withdraw it immediately, James demanded. I can't do that until I'm discharged. We need to go through procedures at the municipal office, I said. Then discharge now. Don't be unreasonable. His selfish demands made me laugh even more. He probably wanted to register his marriage with Patricia, whom he brought on Friday. By the way, was her name Patricia? She's your mistress, right? Hey, that's rude to Patricia. Apologize, she's my new wife. We are not divorced yet, so she's technically your mistress, isn't she? I responded calmly. James made a weird groaning sound. I decided to hit him where it hurt the most. By the way, you'll hear from my lawyer about the division of property. That's right, property, including this trouble. You better share properly. I'm not sure why he misunderstood, but James suddenly sounded in high spirits. After all, the responsible party has to pay the compensation. I had always done my household chores diligently, and of course, I had never cheated on him. It's clear as day that James is the responsible party. What are you misunderstanding? You're the one who has to give me the assets, James responded, genuinely confused. He likely believed that by not taking care of him while I was hospitalized, I would truly be at fault. Even in my parents' time, one wouldn't be deemed at fault for such a reason, I bitterly thought as I listened to his rant. I explained to him patiently, "What fault of mine are you talking about? Just so you know, not being able to do housework because I'm in the hospital doesn't make me at fault. You've abandoned taking care of me. If you were a child, it would be considered neglect. But you're an adult and should be able to take care of yourself. That's why it doesn't make me at fault." "If I say you're at fault, then you're at fault," James insisted. Even a judge would be shocked by his baffling logic. I pictured myself face-palming. Did he really think such childish reasoning would work? Don't you know what's legally defined as grounds for fault? Being at fault means things like infidelity, like having another woman despite having a wife. That's why Patricia is my new wife, and you're no longer of any use to me, so it doesn't apply, right? What are you talking about? Since you were dating her behind my back, it's clearly cheating, I said. James still didn't seem to understand. He was set on believing he was right. Either way, please communicate through a lawyer from now on. Goodbye. "Hey, Nicole!" he shouted, but I hung up the phone without listening to his protests. He called multiple times, but when I ignored him, he eventually gave up and went silent. I was relieved, but the next day, another headache-inducing event occurred. Feeling frustrated by the non-stop ringing from 9 o'clock in the morning, I pressed the call button. On the other end, James was complaining at me like a machine gun. At first, I wasn't sure what he was saying, but piecing it together, it seemed he was complaining about not being able to withdraw money from a bank account. If it's a joint account, James should be able to withdraw without any issue. But if not, I recalled the bank cards and passbooks I had left at home and asked, "Were you trying to take money from my account by any chance?" "Exactly," he said. "You're still in the hospital, and I was going to take the money into account, but the card won't work." James rumbled on with his unreasonable argument. It seemed he didn't understand what I said yesterday. When I was scheduled to be hospitalized for a week, I had called the bank and requested they prevent withdrawals until I was discharged. I could handle it personally after being discharged. It was to prevent James, who was reckless with money, from depleting my savings while I was in the hospital. My decision was proven right. It's unthinkable to try to withdraw money from the account of an ex-wife you've divorced. However, James didn't see anything wrong with it and asked me to make a withdrawal immediately. "What are you talking about? We are practically strangers now." "Why would I do as you say?" I replied. "You and my life haven't changed. Even if we're getting divorced, act like a proper wife and listen to me," James insisted. "We are not legally divorced yet, but we are already strangers, got it?" "Unfortunately, I don't have money to give to strangers," I said. James was shocked since I had never resisted him this much before, but he quickly became assertive again. "Just do as I say. Send the money now. Pay the compensation for not doing housework," he demanded. Even though he was academically capable when we first met, he seemed to lack common sense. 18 years into our marriage, it was clear I had made a poor choice in a partner. James seemed frustrated that I wasn't giving in. He likely had exhausted his cash on hand and probably dipped into the living expenses I had left at home and from our shared account. I spoke to James as if I was talking to a small child. Listen, I'm no longer your submissive wife. We'll settle a property division through a lawyer later on. What? You're so insolent. I'm coming over right now. Just wait, James said, hanging up the phone. I didn't mind if he came to the hospital, but I had already asked the nurses' station not to let anyone in except for my parents, so it was unlikely he'd make it to my room. James really did come to the hospital, but as expected, he was stopped at the nurses' station. My phone kept ringing, but after ignoring it for a while, it switched to messages, and my screen was flooded with notifications. I saved all of them as evidence and contacted my lawyer. After a while, it seemed the lawyer had gotten in touch with James as the messages stopped coming in. I thought it was the end, but my hopes were about to be dashed. There's a visitor named Julia. Would you like to see her? Julia? Please let her in. Julia was a friend who shared my hobbies. Back then, when I was single, Julia and I became close after she responded to my posts on social media where I shared my dining experiences. We discovered we lived nearby and often went out to eat together. After getting married, I couldn't dine out as much to save money, but we kept in touch by regularly meeting for tea and chats. Nicole, are you okay from the injury? Julia asked as soon as she entered the room. Yes, I'm feeling much better now, thank you, I replied. Nicole, things are tough for you right now, aren't they? Julia asked. Huh? Why? I hadn't told anyone about my situation other than my parents. I wondered how Julia knew and asked her. In return, Julia then said something shocking. You know Patricia, the young girl, right? She's having an affair with your husband, isn't she? What? How do you know about that? Wait, you know her? Actually, she's my niece, Julia replied hesitantly. I was so surprised that I couldn't close my mouth. Who would have thought that Julia was Patricia's aunt? The room went silent. It was the first time there was silence when Julia was around, and it made me feel uneasy. Patricia suddenly told her mother, my sister, that she's getting married. What's more shocking is that her partner is 47 years old. When I saw the photo, it was your husband. I was so surprised. I've already told my sister. I'm so sorry for all the trouble my niece has caused you, Nicole. Don't apologize, Julia. It's not your fault, I said. Julia looked like she was about to cry. I'm thinking of demanding compensation from Patricia. I can't compromise on that. But if I do, does this mean our relationship will end? Of course not. I want to continue being friends with you, Nicole. I'll make sure Patricia pays compensation. Neither my sister nor I can forgive what she's done. We'll keep a close eye on her. I was very grateful for Julia's words. We've been friends for over 22 years. I didn't want to lose a precious friend because of my terrible husband and his mistress. I scheduled a meeting with them tomorrow, and I'd like you to come with me, Julia said. Of course. I'll be there, and I can also provide photos as evidence of their affair. The next day, fresh from being discharged from the hospital, I prepared for the meeting. I went to a private restaurant room with my lawyer. James and Patricia had already arrived and were indulging in an expensive traditional meal. I was speechless at their audacity. You finally made it. Did you bring the money? Remember, you were paying for this meal, James said without even stopping his meal. Patricia continued to eat with a smug look on her face. I decided to fight back. Please handle the payment yourselves. I came here to demand a fair share of the assets from the two of you. How long are you going to hold on? You're really unattractive, James remarked rudely, ignoring his comments. My lawyer and I took our seats and showed evidence proving James was at fault. We first presented legal documents about the reasons for liability, followed by documents on property division. Lastly, we showed the photos Julia had provided, which showed Patricia and James together, as well as Patricia with another man entering a hotel. Wait, why? Hey, Patricia, what is this? James and Patricia were visibly shaken by the photos and finally stopped eating. Just then, Julia made her timely entrance. I took those photos, Julia said. Patricia seemed confused as to why her aunt was present. With cold eyes, Julia looked down at Patricia and James and calmly spoke about being friends with me for 22 years and how their actions were despicable. Patricia, you mentioned that the baby you're carrying is his, but given your actions, who knows who the father is? Wait, no, This was the first time I was hearing about her pregnancy. Judging by her appearance today, one would never guess she was pregnant. However, James's reaction showed he believed her claim. So you're pregnant. In that case, after a DNA test, I'll demand an additional penalty, I said. No, I'm sorry, I lied about the pregnancy. Please forgive me, Patricia suddenly admitted, bowing deeply. She had been searching for wealthy old men, and James was her target. He bought her designer goods and promised her a life where she wouldn't have to work and could do as she pleased. She believed she could be a housewife and occasionally have flings with men of her choice. She had once lied about being pregnant because James showed no signs of wanting to divorce. James froze with his mouth agape, and when he heard this, I'm truly sorry, but I can't give you anything. I don't have the money, he said. I'll pay in advance. Patricia, you're going to work part-time diligently every month and repay me. You won't have any free time until you've paid me back in full, Julia said firmly. Oh no, Patricia looked disheartened. Julia mentioned she would bring Patricia back later for another apology and took her out of the restaurant. James, in shock the entire time, seemed to snap back to reality and approached me in a flattering tone. Look, it seems I was deceived. I can't live without you, Nicole, right? We still have the divorce papers here. Can we start over? You've always been a housewife, so you can't possibly work now, can you? He pleaded. I listened to James's pleas with a cold gaze, none of which moved me. I waited for him to finish before answering with a smile. I can live just fine without you. I'll be taking the divorce papers and filing them shortly. Also, I never mentioned this, but my personal net worth is currently around $10 million, so I can live comfortably without working for the rest of my life. Rest assured. 10 million? Why did you keep such a fortune a secret? James asked, shocked. I was about to tell you, but when you started making a fuss about divorce, this money is my personal inheritance, so it doesn't count towards marital assets. It has nothing to do with you, I replied. James looked at me with utter despair. My lawyer quickly produced some documents and a pen for James to sign. The lawyer and I then left and immediately filed for divorce, ending our almost 22-year marriage. Later, Patricia transferred some money to my account. According to Julia, upon learning of this incident, Patricia's mother was furious. She made Patricia take a leave from university and work non-stop at a relative's inn until she paid the compensation. James, on the other hand, was disowned by his in-laws after they learned about the divorce. He was told he wouldn't receive any assistance, so he reluctantly took out a loan and paid me in one lump sum. Furthermore, it was revealed that he had been with Patricia at a hotel during work hours. He was fired from his job and is now juggling multiple construction jobs to repay his debts. As for me, even after receiving such a large sum, I didn't know what to spend it on, so I donated half to charity. I then moved to the countryside with the remaining money, and I'm now enjoying a luxurious single life. I've continued my friendship with Julia. On our days off, we go on food tours and short trips. We both plan to stay single, so I suggested maybe we should share a room. Initially hesitant, Julia agreed when I mentioned we could share deliveries and she could join my meals. Moving preparations started the following week. As I packed up my old life, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for the new chapter ahead. The thought of living true to myself, free from the chains of a toxic marriage, filled me with joy. Julia and I found a beautiful house in the countryside. It was spacious and surrounded by lush greenery. We both loved the tranquility it offered, a stark contrast to the chaos and stress of city life. We set up a cozy living space, complete with a kitchen where we could continue our culinary adventures. As we settled into our new home, our days were filled with laughter and good food. We explored local markets, tried new recipes, and even started a small vegetable garden. The simplicity of our routine brought immense satisfaction. Julia and I grew even closer, sharing not just our home but also our dreams and plans for the future. Despite the hardships I faced, I realized that my life had taken a turn for the better. The toxic relationship with James was a thing of the past, and I had found a true friend in Julia. Together, we built a life filled with love, respect, and mutual support. One sunny afternoon, as Julia and I enjoyed a picnic in our garden, I reflected on my journey. I had gone from feeling trapped and undervalued to experiencing freedom and contentment. I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed and learned the importance of standing up for myself. The lessons I learned during my marriage and the subsequent divorce were invaluable. They taught me resilience and the importance of self-worth. I realized that happiness comes from within, and that surrounding yourself with supportive people makes all the difference. Julia and I often talked about our future plans. We dreamed of traveling, exploring new cuisines, and perhaps starting a small business together. The possibilities seemed endless, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly optimistic about the future. Life in the countryside was peaceful and fulfilling. The fresh air, the sound of birds, and the beauty of nature provided a perfect backdrop for our new beginning. I had found a sense of purpose and joy in the simple things, and it was a feeling I cherished deeply. As the days turned into weeks and then months, Julia and I continued to thrive. Our bond grew stronger, and our friendship became the foundation of our happiness. We supported each other through thick and thin, always knowing that we had someone to rely on. Looking back, I realized that leaving James was the best decision I ever made. It allowed me to rediscover myself and build a life filled with love, laughter, and true companionship. Julia and I had created a haven where we could be ourselves, free from judgment and filled with joy. In the end, I learned that life's challenges often lead to unexpected blessings. My journey taught me the importance of self-respect, the power of friendship, and the beauty of living authentically. I was excited for the future, knowing that with Julia by my side, anything was possible. I was determined to live my life joyfully and true to myself from now on.